story is about a painter, a man who once sought to immortalize beauty, but grew weary of being ignored. This is no ordinary tale of art and ambition. It is the chilling portrait of an artist pushed to the brink by obsession. I call this unsettling piece The Colors of Death.
The painter had once been celebrated, his work gracing gallery walls and drawing whispers of awe from critics. But times change, and tastes with them. His fame faded like the colors of an old painting, leaving him with little more than his brushes, a darkened studio, and a growing sense of invisibility. No one cared anymore. For years he tried to recapture that spark, the magic that had once set his art apart. He poured everything he had into his canvases, but nothing seemed to resonate. People would glance, shrug, and move on. It was maddening. How could the world not see the depth of his vision? How could beauty be ignored? One cold, gray evening, he sat alone in the studio, staring at an unfinished piece. The colors felt lifeless, no matter how many layers he added. Frustration prickled under his skin. He threw his brush across the room, smearing a streak of crimson paint across the wall. As he sat in silence, a thought began to form, a whisper at the edge of his mind. Perhaps he was going about this all wrong. His art wasn't failing because of his skill. It was the medium itself that lacked life. Paint, no matter how vibrant, could never truly capture the rawness of the human experience. The next day, the painter wandered the markets and streets, searching for something different. At a nearby butcher shop, the glistening red of fresh meat caught his eye. He watched as the butcher sliced through cuts of meat with precision, exposing layers of rich texture and color. It was primal, visceral, real. "May I buy some scraps?" he asked. The butcher blinked. "Scraps? What for?" "An art project," the painter replied, vaguely. With a shrug, the butcher wrapped up the remnants and handed them over. The painter returned to his studio and began experimenting, mixing reds and browns with his paints, layering textures that made the canvas almost come alive. For the first time in years, his work felt electric. The paintings became darker, more emotional. His works were raw and unsettling, yet undeniably captivating. Soon, whispers began circulating among the art community. The painter's new series, titled The Anatomy of Despair, was unlike anything anyone had seen before. It wasn't long before his work was once again the talk of the town, but as the weeks passed, his obsession grew. The materials from the butcher weren't enough. He wanted something more natural, something untouched by another hand. He began walking the woods outside the city, collecting fallen feathers, animal bones, and other remnants of life to incorporate into his art. Each painting became an intricate collage, blending paint and nature into something hauntingly beautiful. Yet, even as his fame resurged, there was a gnawing hollowness. The painter's new works were celebrated, but the price was his own sense of peace. He began to lose sleep, haunted by strange dreams of red-streaked skies and shadowy figures whispering warnings. One night, the painter woke to a strange sound in the studio. Heart pounding, he crept toward the door, the floorboards groaning beneath his feet. When he entered, he froze. One of his latest works, a piece titled The Hunter's Dream, had somehow fallen from the easel. Its frame was cracked, and the canvas was torn as though something had tried to claw its way out. The studio felt colder than usual, and the shadows in the corners seemed to move just slightly. He took a shaky step back. Had he gone too far? Had his art awakened something that shouldn't be disturbed? He didn't sleep that night, and when the gallery called the next morning to request another piece, the painter hesitated. He looked at the torn canvas, the scraps of material scattered across the floor, and realized he couldn't bring himself to paint. Not again. As the days passed, the world waited for the next masterpiece, but it never came. The painter withdrew into silence, his studio locked and dark. Rumors swirled about what had happened. Some said he'd lost his muse, others whispered about a breakdown. But if you pass by the painter's house late at night, you might still hear something. A faint scratching, like a brush on canvas, and a quiet voice whispering, "Just one more, just one more."